Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Opsahl Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour to be a part of the program. It's a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalai. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you this hour as another episode of the Ask Noah show kicks off. For the last 15 years of my life, everywhere I go, I'm the IT guy. And so it's kind of it's in the back of my brain. It's almost ingrained into my DNA that if there's a problem with the computer or the network, it's just my problem to fix. And so that's kind of the way I approach life. And every time I sit down, I don't even think about it anymore. Something doesn't work. I just go, well, I guess I better get around to fixing that. So for the first time in 15 years, I'm working at a place where that's not my job. There's somebody else. Now, truth be told, when they first told me, they said, hey, it's the program director for this station that he's the geek among us, so he does the IT. I thought, oh, great. Oh, great. So here we have the guy that, he put his Linksys router into his grandmother's house, and so now he thinks that he's going to manage the IT for an enterprise. This is going to be fantastic.
And he's running a ButterFS server. Right. He thinks he's got it all figured out, right?
And I couldn't have been more wrong, because you know what ButterFS is,
right?
that was the first. And I think the first thing that kind of clued me in was, I bumped into you and you had mentioned something about pfSense, and I thought, now what article have you been reading that you've heard of the name pfSense? What are you trying to name drop there? And
you could just kind of finagle your way through things and actually not have used it,
right?
So yeah, that's kind of where we started. Wait a minute, we kind of know what we're talking about here with each other,
And then we started talking about FreeNAS, and then we started talking about Nextcloud, and all of a sudden I realized this is not. You're not just some program director guy that started playing with IT. You're a geek.
I'm a geek. I admit it. Yeah, I've been a full blown geek for a long time, and I get a lot of slack from my friends. And I think we were kind of talking about this last night. That
right.
when I bring up anything FreeNAS or Linux related, to get a very sideways look from my buddies.
Right.
But I'll be the first person they call when their phone doesn't work, or when the computer doesn't work, or they got a virus, or,
See, and there are plenty of people. So Grand Forks, town of 50,000 some odd people, even Fargo and the surrounding areas, there's a lot of smart people that really know IT. And so, networks and subnetting and getting Office set up and 365 subscriptions and email servers, all of that they have down. Where they lack is they don't have a passion for that technology, and it's a job. It's what they do from 8 in the morning till 5 at night. Then they go home and they do whatever. And you go home and you build home theaters and you put in different kind of servers in your house and play with different firewall platforms and stuff like that. And to find that kind of connection in this town, I didn't think was possible up until a couple of weeks ago.
I know exactly how you feel. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that kind of feel the same way. But, my decompression at night, when I've been doing all this IT work for Windows stuff, and I've been doing all this other stuff at my other job, flight instructing and all that, is going home and wrecking my server and making it work again. I mean, literally, that's what it is. No, thank God I've got a couple servers, and one is in production that my wife relies upon for work and everything.
Right.
And that one I don't touch, but I like to break things and then fix them. And, or just, hey, I've never done this before. Noah's said quite a few things. I'm like, I've never tried that before. Well, we're trying it.
Yeah, right.
And now here I am using Bitwarden that I have never used before.
Self-hosted.
Self-hosted. I'm slowly working my way into it. I'm, I kind of have this thing with 1Password because I've been with them for so long that I'm like, it's really hard to break away. But I've been slowly hitting that Bitwarden extension a lot more than 1Password lately. So, yeah, it's hard to find people in, like you said, in this town,
right?
Let alone in the state of North Dakota. There's 600,000 people that kind of share the same aspect. There's a lot of nerds out there, or techs out there, or geeks out there, but one will be, one thing that I don't know anything about and I'm not real interested in. So we kind of have this bouncing back and forth of it just happened to be, I don't know, fate that we actually like the exact same stuff, which is really cool.
So, and we jumped the gun just a little bit, but Matt Opsahl is his name. He is the IT guy, director,
Sure.
guy. He's the guy. He's the guy that fixes the computer stuff over at the radio station that I work for.
Right. Yep.
And so I do some work over there, filling in for some talk hosts and some of that. And I've started to get into some of the broadcast engineering stuff. And what has impressed me, Matt, quite honestly, is that you're really good at your job. Like,
well, thank you.
It's not just a, well, that's just something you kind of picked up in a hobby. And I think the first time we ever had a phone conversation, I think I said, listen, are you actually an IT guy, or are you just the guy that fell into it because there was nobody smarter in the building?
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't ask that to be condescending. I just asked that so I know what kind of language should I use. Can I talk about IPs and subnets and stuff like that? Or do I need to say the little thing when you click on the box and, you know, and it became pretty obvious that you're a real intelligent guy. And so it's been awesome that my first experience with having an IT guy is a really smart IT guy. Like, that's a really good experience. So I've really appreciated that. But his name is Matt, and he's joining me on the program today because we thought, well, there's a couple things we're going to talk about. But first of all, what we want to talk about is self-hosting and do it yourself, because there's a lot of people out there. They want to do things themselves. They understand that there is an inherent advantage in owning that technology and not relying on some service, not paying for some ransom fee every month to be able to host your data. You can do that if you're willing to A, do the research, and B, put the time in.
Yep.
And you have a lot of experience with that. In fact, you've documented this on your YouTube channel where you actually built a home theater.
Yes. And that's been about 3 years in the making now. It was actually, so a little bit of a backstory. My wife and my daughter and I, we go to Florida every year. And there was 3 years ago we were in Florida, and we were at a restaurant. And funny enough, we went back to the same restaurant here just 2 weeks ago when we were there, the same one, where we decided we're going to finish our basement. And so it just started off as literally going out and finishing our basement. That's always going to be a couple bedrooms, an office, in a living room. And it kind of evolved then into, well, I won't lie, I kind of had in the back of my mind that I wanted a theater.
But that's the way you get it past the wife approval.
The WAF factor, you know, the wife approval factor, obviously. So that's how I introduced it, and it just kind of evolved from there. So I was very lucky in that sense.
And so you've documented this entire process. Chat room is asking where they can find it. It's 40ish Geek?
40ish Geek, yeah, on YouTube. And I haven't updated, I'll be honest, I haven't updated in like 2 years, but I am definitely going to be doing it. Yeah. I just got lazy, plain and simple.
Right.
And it's not even because, people say, oh, I ran out of time. I didn't run out of time. I just literally got lazy. So. And
if it's too early to talk about this, we can totally bail on this, but you're actually going to enter back into this sphere pretty soon.
Yes. Yeah, we can talk about it. Okay. I think so.
So Matt and I were sitting there, we're talking, and we're at the radio station, and a third friend, Brad Schmidt, who's been on this program once or twice, and I'm sure a couple of you listen to his show on Monday mornings. He gave me a call and said, hey, I want to do Tech for the Holidays. I want to do a segment on the radio on what to buy the geeks among you, the geek friends in your life. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. So I go in, we start sitting down to do the segment. And as we're talking about this, the studio is essentially this big glass room you can see out everywhere. And I see Matt walking down the hallway. And so I start talking. I said, hey, that guy should come in here, Matt. He's a smart guy. He would probably have something to add to this. And after we got past the 15-second delay, because as he walks past, then he goes back into the IT room, and all of a sudden I see him go, whoop, and then dashes right back in. So we sat down, and it was going to be a single segment, ended up filling the rest of the hour, and we all three of us looked at each other and went, man, that was really fun.
That was a blast. Yeah, I've done radio, honestly, for 21 years, and that by far ranks in the top 5 funnest things I've ever done in radio. And it was only like 30 minutes, maybe 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't very long.
We didn't plan it.
Yeah, it was just totally off the cuff.
So I scrapped the rest of the show prep that I was going to do that half hour, and we just had fun talking, and we got done, and we looked and said, we need to do that. Like, that needs to be a regular thing.
Absolutely.
And so we got together in Matt's home theater, actually, and sat down, had a couple beers, and just started discussing and said, how would we go about creating a podcast for people that essentially, how do we create a podcast by geeks for people that want to get into the geek world? How do we create an environment where a couple geeks can come together and just have a discussion about cool geeky things? And so that's going to be launching in the next couple weeks, next couple months. And you and I are going to get together, and that we're just going to sit down and chat about geek things. Yep. We might invite Schmidt along and just have a good time.
So I have to apologize. I just read off to the side here about someone saying he talks fast too. The 2 peas in the pod. When I get really excited about stuff, I talk really, really fast.
I do it all the time. They're used to it.
So
they're used to it. Since day one of this program, the most consistent piece of feedback I've ever gotten is, listen, I love your excitement. I love your passion. The information is great. Every other podcast I listen at 1.5 to 2.5 times. Yours is the only one I have to slow down. And so it's, I just consider it to be efficient communication.
Yeah.
Right? If I can say something in 30 seconds instead of a minute, why would we not do that?
I'm trying to pack enough in there. So, but yeah, we had a great conversation, and I think we're on the right track. I think there's some really cool stuff that's gonna be coming up here. So
we'll let you know more as time goes on. And of course, one of the things that you and I talked about is that network effect, that ability to say, listen, there is a ton of overlap between people that call in to ask Linux questions and people that want to just hear a general geek show. There's a lot of overlap there, right? Mm-hmm. And so and it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. So as that show continues to build up listenership, there can be cross promotion going on. And
absolutely. So I hope there is.
Yeah.
You know, I definitely don't want the competition. I mean, the whole point of what we're doing with Brad too, and he's more political, is just building kind of this network where you can go to this one little place and say, well, I want the politics, or I want geek, or I want Linux, or we're going to hopefully add quite a bit more to it too.
Right. So and as that builds up, and of course we'll tie Destination Linux and all of that into that. So I think it'll be a really good opportunity for everybody involved, and so we'll, as more information comes back, we'll have that available. Again, you too can join the program 1-855-450 Noah. That's 855-450-6624. It looks like you have a full mumble room. Hey guys, how are you?
Hello.
Hello.
We are fine.
It is a seriously filled up place today. Well, thanks for being here. You guys feel free to poke us in the chat room. We'd be more than happy to put you on the program. So, Matt, I guess I was going to ask, why do you choose to self-host stuff? Like, you've got the budget, you've got the ability to pay for Dropbox and something.
Yeah.
It's not like you live in the poorhouse, but why do you choose to host your data on your own server and go through that trouble as opposed to just paying for something?
I think because I can. I think that's really the reason why. Like I ran Dropbox up until I started running Nextcloud here about a year ago, give or take. And I'm not into this whole data privacy thing. I don't really care if they go through my files. There's nothing in there that my wife knows that our super documents are encrypted, and we have those somewhere else. But so it wasn't really for that. It was just because I could. And again, it was more the playing aspect of just going in, and man, when you get that thing going and you get the kind of the goosebumps going, you're like, oh my God, everything's syncing and my phone works and I'm sending pictures from my phone. It just gives me a real kick.
And it makes you feel more important, right? Like the server goes down, you're like, listen, my prod 1 server is down. The data cannot replicate. All of my users are unable to access our infrastructure. This cannot be. We aim for 5 nines of upside here at Opsahl's, data center.
But yeah, I think for me, like I said, it wasn't a privacy thing at all. I trust Dropbox with the stuff I had. It was just pictures and videos and whatnot. But it was more the geek aspect of it. It was just doing it. And knowing that I can do it. And then, to be honest, I'm waiting for it to break. I kind of want it to happen.
That's what you hear from people that try Linux for the first time. They say, I just keep waiting for it to break. I'm just waiting for it to crash. I keep waiting for it to blue screen. Then it doesn't. And you look back and it's like, well, it's been 8 years now. I guess I should probably start maintaining the thing.
Right. And you know what's going to happen is I'm going to be over in Europe on my family trip, and that's when everything's going to go south on me, and I'll have to rebuild stuff remotely, but whatever. It's fine. You
can handle it.
Yeah.
1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. You're on Ask Noah. Hello. Brad, Alabama.
Hey, Noah. This is Brad from Huntsville. How are you?
Hey, pretty good. How we doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I had a question for you regarding VPN. With all the talk about WireGuard lately, I've been kind of wanting to play around with it, but I can't really find a good, use case for it. I was thinking about possibly putting my Nextcloud instance behind the VPN, but I'm not really sure what kind of benefit that would, allow me to gain, possibly using it to get around a port restriction at work, or so I'm not really sure. So I didn't know if you could tell me, maybe elaborate on some benefits to putting stuff behind the VPN, and also the pros and cons of putting the VPN on the same box as the service. So like having Nextcloud and the VPN both being on the same computer versus them being 2 separate machines.
Sure. Matt, what are your thoughts?
So I run one of my servers I run is called Unraid. And this is it's Linux based and it runs Dockers. So my Nextcloud and my VPN's on a different one. I run a different Untangle server for that. But my Nextcloud runs it on RAID. But I also run Let's Encrypt. And I don't know if you know what that is, but that's the reverse proxy. And the reverse proxy allows me to come in over SSL or HTTPS HTTPS to the Nextcloud server without having to worry about port forwarding through my Untangle and everything. So, I'll be honest, up to the point of when I was running the reverse proxy, I don't like opening ports. I've always kind of had that yuck in my gut when I run.
As you should. You're essentially poking holes in your firewall.
Exactly. So I was actually running VPN. But it was a real pain to hook up the VPN, let the Nextcloud sync, and then I'm like, there's got to be a better way than this. So I don't know. In terms of running them on the same service, the only thing is that you have to worry about is the possibility of a failure, a total failure. If you lose one, you lose everything. But what are you running for a server right now? Is he there?
Yeah, he is.
Currently I'm running Nextcloud on not a Raspberry, but a Rock 64 board, one of the little Pine boards.
Okay, one of the ARM architecture.
On a home server. And it's using the Let's Encrypt. It's running the Nextcloud Pi, so I've got the HTTPS through it and everything.
Yeah, so I wouldn't worry too much about. I don't know if you need VPN if you're running it over Let's Encrypt. And do you have the Let's Encrypt all fired up? It's running okay and everything?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, unless you're really, really worried about your data, but it's already encrypted at that point. So
yeah, where I find that VPN is helpful, I guess I've always found it helpful in the sense that I get access to my network from outside the network. I don't know that I would set up VPN for one particular service. The only exception to that would be if you need one particular service that is not secure. And I'll give you an example where we use that all the time. There are plenty of pieces of networking equipment that I have to administrate that it doesn't support anything other than Telnet because it was made back in 1965 and they don't update it anymore. Yet it's still in production. I have to work with that. And so the way we get around that is it's on its own separated network, and I've got a box that's hooked up that allows me to Telnet into that particular antiquated device, and I use a VPN to access the control box, I guess. In that particular situation, a VPN would be useful, but as far as just for Nextcloud, no, you wouldn't gain anything because like you said, like you and Matt have both already pointed out, Let's Encrypt is already encrypting your traffic, so it's already a private connection.
All right, then let me ask you this thing real quick. So at my work, I can't SSH out of the computer, but it seems to be a network thing. So if I hotspot my phone and then connect the computer to my phone, then I can SSH out, so I can administer like a DigitalOcean droplet or something like that. Would connecting to my home VPN over my work's network, would it allow me to get around port block at all, or is that more?
I'm going to put a caveat on that, though. When we were up in Canada, we were at the airport at Winnipeg waiting for our plane, and I tried to connect with my VPN back home through port 443, and it wouldn't take. So, I'm sorry, 1194. 1194 is that the Open SSL port?
Open VPN.
Yeah, Open VPN. Yeah, 1194. It wouldn't take that. And I have one set for port 443. That's right. And that one did connect. So it kind of depends on what ports they're blocking. There is a possibility they could be blocking VPN also. So you'd have to find out and just try it, I guess. Yeah.
The other thing you can do is use non-standard ports. So I would venture to say if you connected with SSH over port, I'm just going to make something up, 5555, that may connect if port 22 doesn't. And one of the things that you can do in like the Microtech routers or pfSense is you can specify multiple incoming ports and a different translation port on the local side. So for example, you could set up an SSH connection for port 5555. So when it hears a connection on 5555, the router will translate that to port 22 on the inside of your network. And that would also get around the problem. You wouldn't have the overhead of setting up a VPN.
Someone brought up a really good point to be careful and make sure that it doesn't go against your work's policies. That's a really good idea, actually. So I would be careful with that. If you think you may be trying to go around something, there might be a reason for it. So.
Yeah, I'll definitely double check with them. So that was mostly a one case thing where I was interacting with the droplet specifically for work. But yeah. All right. I appreciate it, guys.
All right.
Yeah, appreciate the call. 855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Make your voice heard, become part of the program. Also, Eric, the IT guy in the chat room, says that when you shut off port 22, it makes fail to ban much quieter. So the idea is that there are people out there that will just port scan the heck out of port 22 and try to see what they can get into. And that may be why your work has decided to drop some of that traffic. So just changing the port, it may not be that they have necessarily a policy against it. It may just be that they don't want to have to deal with all of the unknown traffic that's going to come in on that standard port. Again, 855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. If you want to make your voice heard and become a part of the conversation, we invite you to do so. We're chatting with Matt Opsahl, talking about self-hosting. So, Matt, when did you first hear about Linux, or how did you... was it just something that you found a project and you just found, that uses that Linux thing, or was it something that you had an active interest in?
I think I started using Ubuntu. Oh boy. I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, but I actually had a MacBook that I bought.
Okay.
And I dumped it and put Ubuntu on it. And people say, well, why would you do that? Well, because I had a good piece of hardware and I had a good piece of software for a while.
Sure.
I mean, but the only problem is it wasn't great because drivers were kind of tough and it didn't jive very good. But I used it for probably 2 years that way. But I think that was probably my first introduction to Ubuntu. Running it live for a while, off just USB, just kind of playing with it and seeing, what can I do? What can I break? What can I fix? And how do you load things? That's kind of one of the big things I think scares people off is repositories and, loading software. 'Cause there's different ways of loading things sometimes that can make people a little nervous. But once you know it, it's just like every other software out there.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, and the thing is, a lot of times people will come over to the Apple platform because they want a consistent user experience. They want the security and stability that macOS provides over like a Windows system. And what you find is that Linux will offer a lot of those same advantages. You just have to be willing to put a little bit of the work in because, at least at the moment, you can't just walk into Best Buy and walk out with a Linux computer.
Yeah.
And so when you have, but what I found with a lot of people that use that are in the Mac ecosystem, it works fine for them for 4 or 5 years. And then all of a sudden they hit this thing where they're like, I want to do more.
Yes.
And they hit that walled garden edge and they go, well, now how do I expand a little bit? And that's where you start to see a lot of people start to install other operating systems on their MacBook because it's a great piece of hardware. Now, how can I pair it with an even better piece of software?
And I think we were kind of talking about this when we were on Brad's show a couple days ago. I'm an iPhone guy, and to be totally honest, I would actually go to Android if I could. The problem is I'm so built into the ecosystem right now, and it's not only me. That's the other side of it too. It's that my wife, my daughter, my family, my parents, all of our friends, they're all Apple people. So swapping pictures and iMessage and all that stuff. I've almost contemplated going dual phone. I've actually thought about that because I really want to go Android.
It's not it might not be as crazy, as it may seem on the front of it, because honestly, there's a lot of reasons to have kind of a work business phone and a personal play phone.
Yeah, right, exactly. I don't need it. I really don't. I don't get enough phone calls for that. But just the ability to have both, I guess, is probably more of the reason why. Again, just because I can.
So here, this is going to throw another a wrinkle in your decision making process here. Google has announced a release date for Google Fuchsia. Now, if you're not familiar with what Google Fuchsia is Google's essentially project, internal operating system project, where they're going to replace Android and ChromeOS. Instead of running on the Linux kernel, it's going to run on a kernel that Google has developed. And there has been a lot of backlash to this because companies like Samsung, companies like LG are tied to the hip at Google for the Android operating system, and so this changes it. Now, I would argue that for a long time, Samsung has been spending a lot of time trying to re-implement a lot of Google's infrastructure outside of Android. They've created their own contact app and their own cloud syncing and backup app and those kinds of things. And so I see this as a real detriment to Android specifically, not so much a detriment to Linux, because I think when you start looking at Samsung's DeX and their ability to run a desktop version of Linux on Samsung, and that's supported from the company, comes out of the box, I don't see Samsung divorcing the Linux kernel anytime soon. But I do see the possibility of Google doing this, so Matt, where it provides a crank in the neck for you is now you have projects like UbiPorts, which is an ability to run essentially Ubuntu on your Android-based phone. So you can install your own operating system and things like Lineage and all of those things where you have essentially a free version of Android. So it makes the decision a little bit more confusing because now you essentially have three options. Your choices are iOS, Android proper, or one of the side-loaded operating systems that you could put on your phone. Is that something that you'd ever consider?
Oh, I consider anything. Again, I'm up for anything. I really am. And to the point where I've really wrote down a pros and cons list of actually ditching Apple altogether. And I just, right now, it's just not tied into the family structure of the way we do things right now. It's just a lot easier for me to stay where I'm at and play with things outside of it. And with my daughter only being 11, my wife, does not do technology, period. And to move her to Android would be an absolute disaster.
Right. And then you become the support guy, right?
Exactly.
Every time every time she's got a question, she's coming to you. And the other thing is, I'm guessing that the vast majority of her friends exist on that Apple ecosystem.
Yep.
So she's got a support network built in, and she's got their infrastructure that they're utilizing at school and social.
And again, it's that is really the only thing holding me back. I really, really want to go, but here I am.
Yeah,
so.
No, I hear you. Again, 1-855-450-KNOW. That's 855-450-6624. The email live at AskNoahShow.com. We go to the Linux Newswire. Here's Eric, the IT guy.
From the Linux Newswire studio, this is the Weekly Roundup with Eric, the IT guy.
Hey Noah, happy to be with you again, and here are your Linux and open source headlines. The Linux kernel is in the headlines again this week with the announcement of Linux kernel 5.0 RC1. After almost 28 years of development, Linus Torvalds has decided to increment the version from 4.20 to 5.0. As usual, citing there is no big reason, just felt it was time. While this release does not bring with it any major overhauls or flagship features, it does see huge additions in mainline drivers, sunsetting of old drivers and code, as well as WireGuard and AMD FreeSync support. Kernel 5.0 is planned to be available for distributions in March of 2019. A new vulnerability in the Google Chromecast has surfaced in recent weeks called CastHack. For devices that reside on a UPnP, Universal Plug-and-Play, enabled router, two ethical hackers were able to compromise thousands of devices to display messages on how to fix the bug and even provided a link to popular cybersecurity education YouTube channels. According to Google, this is not technically a flaw in the Chromecast itself, however, they do recommend disabling UPnP on network routers. Regardless, affected devices will leak Wi-Fi networks, both connected and remembered, what Bluetooth devices are connected, as well as exposing the ability for nefarious parties to factory reset or reboot the device, or connect it to alternative Wi-Fi networks and Bluetooth devices altogether. As of this time, specifics about this vulnerability or a timeline for fixing them have not been released. Project Soli has been given the green light this week by the FCC. Built by Google's Advanced Technology and Projects Group, Soli is a new radar-based, short-range motion sensor that provides virtual controls for mobile devices. The sensors detect motion, even through fabric, quote, providing for innovative device control features using touchless hand gesture technology. An example provided in routers is adjusting an invisible volume knob just by rubbing two fingers together. Google hopes that Soli will lead in a new era of mobile device interaction as well as advancements in technology usage by users with mobility and speech impairments. Finally, this week, the Thunderbird project announces huge plans for 2019. Mozilla will be increasing the Thunderbird staff from 8 to as many as 14. Early milestones will be to overhaul the UI and improve support for Gmail. Late last year, community manager Ryan Sipes published a request for user feedback on the most recent release, Thunderbird 60. Recent personnel changes and increased community involvement have spurred interest in the native email client. The team hopes that UI improvements and paying off legacy debt will help make Thunderbird once again the cross-platform staple for open-source email management on the desktop. For LinuxNewsWire.com, I am Eric, the IT guy.
Thanks, Eric. Eric is with us every week, bringing us a weekly roundup of Linux use. Happy to have him, and we appreciate him for doing that. So this week has been an interesting week for obviously Linux kernel 5.0 was out, and I didn't see a lot in there that was really worth digging into. But when I started talking to Matt about self-hosting, then I started to look at what other projects were doing, and it turns out KDE is fighting this battle as well. So KDE, the desktop environment, one of the many desktop environments for Linux, is looking at moving their hosting system over to GitLab. Now, currently, it's over at Phabricator. And I wanted to get Matt's input on this. Matt, do you have any experience or a lot of experience with GitHub or GitLab or any of those sorts of things? Have you played with it at all?
A little bit. I don't have my own repo or anything like that. I mostly just go there and get other people's stuff. But yeah, on a minute scale, I guess you could say.
So one of the things that I thought might be kind of interesting to you or might be fun to chat about is the idea of using Git technology to do other things other than programming code, right? So you can do it. You can use it for all sorts of things, like backing up configuration files, for example, and having those configuration files or configuration templates that you can have just at a moment's notice. Then you can grab them and say, "Well, I'm going to spin up." I've gone through the trouble of setting up like Rivendell. You and I were talking about setting that up, and all of the little tweaks that you would do. We can take all of those configurations and put them up on a GitLab instance, for example, and then we can just pull that information down the next time we ever need to set that same thing up. And so I think there's a lot of uses for Git type technology. And the interesting thing is that this story forced me to dig a little bit into Phabricator. So Phabricator, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a software technology that is specifically designed to compete with GitHub or GitLab. It does a lot of the same things that Git does, but it has a much higher learning curve. And so the KDE team is saying, hey, we need to jump off of Phabricator where we've been for a very long time, and we need to move on to something that has a lower learning curve like Git. The other advantage to Git, obviously, is that it has the industry support of everybody knows how to use Git, right? So even Matt, who, you've said, I don't have my own repo, I'm not doing this, but you've pulled information from Git. You figured out how to do that because there's a lot of guides and stuff for that on the internet.
Yep, absolutely. And going back, when Git first came out, I'm sure there weren't a lot of people that were supporting it at the time.
Right.
It's just a matter of, it's a word of mouth. And once you find something that actually works better than the other, and I'm not saying Git's bad at all, but if Phabricator can really come in and blow everyone out of the water, it's just a matter of time before everyone's using that.
Absolutely. And I don't, so the issue because Phabricator has been around for a little bit, so I think the issue is that there is this paradigm that exists in the technology world, and I'm sure you've seen it as well. There is a lot of times the technically superior solution, and then there is the socially superior solution, and time again, what we find is that the socially superior solution wins. We saw that with beta versus VHS. You find that with Blu-ray versus DVD HD. Like, there's all these competing technologies, and oftentimes there's one that I can make a far better technical argument for, and yet the other one wins, and for no conceivably explainable reason other than people tend to, I guess, just dance around the lowest common denominator. Yeah.
Well, I think the bigger, one of the things that I think kind of stands out with that is, and we talked a little bit about this, like OS 10, it's just candied, it's a candied Linux version. Right. Literally that's really what it is. And it's very, for the average user, it's very easy to use. Now, there is some Linux components that you can dig in and do, but you got a lot of turning on and turning off of things to make that work. They still leave the functionality there, but you got a lot of turning off and turning on of things to do. I think that's kind of the same way in this world right now we're in, where people are looking for easy. They don't want to do the legwork for it. Right. Except for geeks that like doing that kind of stuff. There's just most people that just say, I just want it to look pretty and I just want to use it. Yes. And which means, unfortunately, you take away a lot of the functionality. You take away some of that really cool stuff that you can do, in essence, making it a little dumbed down, right. But it's easier for most people to use. So. Yeah, and we've watched that happen, and it can be really frustrating for us that look at some of this stuff from a 30,000-foot view and go, well, that's a bad idea. We shouldn't be doing that. And why are we? And like you say, it comes down to people just want it to be pretty and work. The thing about Phabricator is, I dug into it a little bit. So Phabricator was originally designed actually by Facebook. And they designed it as an internal project to develop and continue the development of Facebook. Then they opened up as an open source project. So now everybody can use Phabricator. The thing is, it may have a higher learning curve, and I had that exact same reaction, but it may have a higher learning curve, but there are some really cool functionality. So Phabricator, for example, supports calendaring. It supports syntax review, global wikis, legal contract signing, internal chats, blogs, and funding. So
you look at some of that functionality and some of those features and say, you know, it would be really helpful as a company who expends a lot of money trying to set up infrastructure to track some of these things. When we have a project, you know how great it would be to have the contracts that we have to have the client sign in the exact same place, in the exact same dashboard, if I can use that term. The exact same dashboard is the place that we publish the blogs to all of the customers for the upcoming things that we're doing, and the same thing that is tied into the funding and revenue generating models, that all of that stuff can work together and be all in one place. That kind of centralization of effort and centralization of data and the ability to cross-check that eliminates so much of tying one API into another and having this read that database so that we can get this information over to there. I mean, just from the simple standpoint of our client database, where we have a leads aggregator that basically says, here's somebody that might want to service, and having that tied into our ticket system so that when somebody says yes, salespeople say, yeah, they want to go ahead with that project. Now we have to get a technician to actually do the work. Just that disconnect alone represents thousands of dollars to us as a company to be able to make that work. And so when I look at something like Phabricator and I say, listen, all of this functionality is just built into one place, and then add to that, it's open source. So it means that if it doesn't quite fit a bill, we can tweak it to shoehorn it into fitting a bill. I think that's a superior solution, is it not?
Well, yeah, I think it is a very much a superior solution. But again, you have to be able to sell it to people who are a little more technologically advanced and are a little more willing to get their hands dirty. And I think that's probably where they start to lose a lot of people.
The interesting thing about KDE's decision to do this is I don't entirely understand their rationale. So their argument on their page, which we'll have linked for you in the show notes, is that they're looking to host on GitLab because they have to have a self-hosted version. Their policy prohibits them from hosting their code with a paid service. It has to be self-hosted. Yeah. The thing that is confusing to me about that is the very structure of Git itself, right? Or Phabricator, for that example. Everything is self-hosted. It's decentralized. That's the whole idea. And Git servers are simply just fancy Git clients. And so everybody that works on the project has a copy of the code base. Now, you might have minor inconsistencies until they synced with each other, but the reality is that the vast majority of the code base exists in not just one or two places, but probably hundreds, if not thousands of locations. So I don't really understand where the advantage there is from going from something like Phabricator to GitLab. Both are self-hosted, both are decentralized, so it seems like that's neck and neck. Where there might be an advantage, or where there might be some ground to be covered, is in the fact that Git is so much more widely accepted by the industry. Everybody knows how to use Git. There's literally jokes. I don't know if you've seen it, but we used to have a sign, and it said, in case of fire, Git commit, Git push, then exit building, right? And the joke was that you had to get the code off of your local machine and get it up to the repo before you left, so that you didn't lose your work. They literally make jokes and memes about. Because I can buy that sign. Yeah. There's jokes and memes made about Git. Phabricator, I'll bet you there's not an insignificant portion of the listening audience that this is the first time they've heard of Phabricator. Because it's spelled with a PH, by the way. And we'll have a link for you in the chat room because we're going to dig into it a little bit more. And also one of those things that I want to start working with a little bit more at Altispeed, because I think, like I say, I can see the advantages to this system. I can see how some of this functionality would be very beneficial. But I'm not sure that I really think that the KDE project is going to make a lot of headway by moving off of Phabricator. The other thing that I spoke to a couple people that work on the KDE development team, and I asked them point blank, are you happy about this? Are you not happy about this? Is this a good thing, or is this a bad thing? And what I got from the vast majority of them were, actually, we don't really have a problem with Phabricator. It's actually worked very, very well for us for a long time. And everybody inside the project, yes, there's a little bit higher of a learning curve, but we've all figured it out. We all know how to do it. We're all able to get our work done. And frankly, we like all of the functionality that exists in Phabricator, and functionality that we simply don't have a way to replace if we move to GitLab. And so I'm left with, I don't know that this is a great decision for them. I think that Phabricator is possibly the superior solution. So I'm interested in feedback. If you have feedback, if you'd let me know, write to live@asknoahshow.com and let me know what your thoughts are on this. Is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? Have you used have you used Phabricator? And if so, have you used it side by side with GitLab? And which is the technically superior solution? And then do you think that that they would gain a significant development base if they moved over to a more common platform? Again, you can join the program 855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. You can join us in our interactive chat room at chat.asknoahshow.com, as well as our interactive mumble room. All sorts of ways to add your voice to the conversation. So, Matt, one of the things that I wanted to talk with you a little bit about, you have worked in radio for a long, long time.
21 years. Well, actually, hold on. What is it? 22 years now.
So you have watched the technology in the radio industry just like skyrocket.
When I first started, which was back in 97, we were using Scott's 32, SS32, 32 based, or it was 32-bit, excuse me. But it wasn't Windows. I think it was just run off of DOS. I believe it ran right off of DOS.
Okay.
It was a boot from DOS. And literally when I had started, it was right after the flood we had in Grand Forks in 97, and they had wiped everything out from all the carts. So I never had the cart aspect, the old radio carts that most people have. So I was able to start with touchscreen right then. And so I went from Scott's 32, SS32 to, geez, what else did I go to? I don't remember. There's a couple others in between there, but it was, it was kind of seeing it evolve. It's amazing how much it still looks the same as it did back then, and still works the same. You got your carts, you got your hotkeys, and that's really all you need for a radio station. So,
but watching that grow to where we are today, even if you started, that's still very early versions of automation, even if you weren't manually loading carts.
Oh, yeah.
That's still very early automation. And so to watch that to where it's come today, where you have internet syndication and you have the computers that are literally, this board has no audio in it at all. It's literally just a really, really expensive USB controller, essentially, with the gigantic Ethernet cable hanging out the back of it. Watching those kinds of technologies come into practice and kind of following it has to be fantastic. It has to be really fascinating.
It is. It's really neat to see. I remember back in the day when we used to carry hockey games, and we actually streamed it from our studio. Like, everyone connected to our studio.
Oh, wow.
And that's how it was streamed out.
And this was 10 years ago when the bandwidth probably wasn't there to support that.
20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is 20 years ago, and they actually dialed into our studio, and that's how they streamed it. We had a website, but it kind of jumped us back to the studio. Anyways, to where we're at now, where you can stream out to 100,000 people, no problem, but obviously you're not doing it from in-house. It's being one stream.
You've got a
sent
CDN
out.
in between there.
So seeing where we've gone, where we've come from, and where we're at now is it's amazing. Like you were saying, one cord coming out of your mixer board.
Right.
The old days you had 15, 20, 30 cables coming out.
Yeah, I tell you what, I've worked enough. I was so happy when I started playing into the radio industry. So by comparison, I've been involved with radio at all of 2 years. And what's been interesting to me when I got in there and they said, we used to use 66 blocks. And I'm like, I've spent enough time punching wires down on 66 blocks. I could do away with that for the rest of my life and I'd be perfectly happy, right? Like, there's something to be said about the simplicity of just banging into the block and being able to actually look at a physical connection and saying, well, this is not getting to here and here's why, I'm being able to actually see it.
Yeah.
There is an advantage there. But at the same time, like, I'm not upset that I missed that aspect of radio. But what's interesting is talking to you and watching somebody who is a veteran of the industry and then looking at it and you're saying, I'm looking at where podcast is going. You're bringing all of the advantages and all of the practices that radio is doing right over to the podcasting side, and yet you're not married to old technology just because that's the way we've always done it.
No, and that's not me. I am not one person to hold on to anything for very long. I move on. I move on with technology. Got to have the newest, got to have the latest and the greatest. That's just part of who I am. I like to spend my money on that stuff. So it's sitting and dwelling on old analog equipment when you know that you can have something smaller, cleaner,
right,
lighter, much easier to work with. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
It's great to learn on that stuff. If you're podcasting, you pick up some old equipment and learn the analog side of it and then move into digital. That's kind of actually where I'm going with where we're at. But I think you definitely want to learn something there. But at the same time, you're not gaining anything by sticking with the old stuff in this. field.
One of the guys I used to work with, him and I always used to joke that the people that are starting in today, and this is a conversation we had even 2-3 years ago, people that are starting, they'll never understand some of the heartache that you had to deal with 10 or 15 years ago, because today you can buy a really high quality USB microphone and plug it in, and you'll sound just as good as the $20,000 studio guys. And that just wasn't a possibility 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. I mean, a lot of this technology has just come out very recently and allows just anybody to be able to create content.
Yeah, and if that's really the big thing. Someone's not going to listen to your podcast or your radio show or your TV show just because you look or sound great. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe some lookers, but for the most part, you got to have the content. You really, really have to have a good set of content to be able to put out to people, because otherwise it's just going to flip off. I mean, how many podcasts are out there right now? Yeah. Hundreds of thousands.
Oh, the noise floor is just ridiculous.
So, I mean, you are competing against a lot of people. So, you really have to come in headstrong. Yeah, you really have to show up.
So, and that's where I think that's where you and I really agree, because one of the things that has been frustrating for me working with other people in the podcast industry is they try to reinvent the wheel, and they don't want to take the hard-learned lessons and the well-tried and true lessons of broadcast technology and implement. And you and I were talking just on the example of mix minus buses, right?
Yeah.
Just a very simple thing, and not to get drugged down into the weeds with broadcast technology, but this idea that people in the podcast industry are still struggling with this, and the broadcast industry figured that out 30 years ago. And they have been designing equipment to deal with this for 30 years, and nobody on the not nobody, but very few people on the podcast side are taking advantage of that. They're still going through and trying to use aux buses and all sorts of things to try to get, and then they struggle because they have echo and feedback and all of those kinds of things.
Well, yeah, and that's one side of it too. I mean, if you're going to take calls and you're going to have other people on your show and that kind of stuff, you do have to have the right equipment for it. You can't just go out to, well, not Radio Shack anymore, but a store like that and just buy a Mackie board that's got 4 inputs on it and doesn't have any way of doing mix minus. That's just not going to work for you.
Right.
So you really have to tailor it to what you're going to do. Yep. If you're just going to talk and you're not going to interview anybody, it doesn't matter. But you really kind of have to tailor your equipment to what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, and so it's been really, I guess, refreshing to be able to work with somebody who understands some of that stuff. And then, but is, again, not married to, just because we've always done it on an analog transmitter, then if it's not going out over an FM terrestrial station, then it's quote unquote not good enough. So that has been really refreshing.
Well, and prefacing that really quick, if we were 10 or 15 years ago that people didn't have cell phones that could stream everything,
sure,
I would say, yeah, we should probably stick with the AM FM right now.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
Right now we're at a point where people have AM FM on their phone,
yes,
let alone streaming capability, where your podcast is maybe 50 megabytes. I mean,
right,
on your data plan, that's nothing.
And the other thing is, you look to skating where the puck is going to be. If I can use a hockey reference, the reality is that you'll go around and look at the studio that you and I work in, right? There are no analog boards, there are no cart machines, there are no analog switches. Everything is being done with IP technology. Everything is being done digitally. And so there is no doubt in my mind that sometime in the very near future, the only thing that continues to be analog is that final hop from the transmitter over to the consumer side equipment. And now you're looking at Tesla. They don't even have an FM radio inside the car.
Yeah.
And you look at some of the newer vehicles, all of them are coming built in, most of them anyway, with 4G LTE streaming.
Yeah, and that's
all the Chevys are doing that.
A lot of Chevy. My truck's got that, and I don't even use it. I don't pay for it or anything, but it's there.
So the technology is there. So how long before finally somebody goes, hey, you know what? Can you stream? Can you do like Spotify and Pandora and stuff in there?
I can, if I had paid for the data plan.
Okay,
but I can just sling it from my phone at where it's at.
Right.
So,
but we're getting to because the thing is, I think radio is going to reign supreme while radios are still on the dashboard, because that's how people like to get content, frankly, because people are lazy. And most people are too lazy to tether their phone or to start a streaming service on their phone and then, Bluetooth up to their car and all of that. But I think once that stuff starts being integrated into the car itself, into the dashboard head unit of the car, then I think the delivery is easily going to be over IP. It just makes sense.
Yeah.
Because we're continuing to build IP infrastructure, and we're continuing to wind down analog transmission infrastructure.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I really do. And again, it's not a biased thing because we're on a podcast.
Right.
I really believe that. And the radio stations, they may end up well, I guess they kind of are with HD radio. I mean, that's all digital based. You know, that's kind of where it's going.
Yep.
So it's just a matter of time before everything just goes IP. I agree 100%.
So we'll have to watch that. But like I say, that's what's exciting about working with you, is because you have both sides of that, and now I have both sides of that. And so to be able to work with somebody else that's kind of on the same page has been really nice. 855-450-NOAH, that's 855-450-6624. Marcus, Texas, you're on the Ask Noah Show. What's up?
Hi, I live in a very rural area where I get my internet via a cell phone or a cell phone hotspot, and I'm a Linux newbie, and I wanted to know the best way of setting that up.
Okay. So you want to know the best way of setting up your laptop to connect to a hotspot?
No, I want to set up a Linux server to route my internet through to my actual router, because the hotspot is really dumb. It has a maximum of 9 clients, period.
I see.
So if it gets like 8 or 9 people, it literally just completely locks, jumps everybody off the internet for about 3 to 4 minutes.
So you want to, basically
reconnect with
you want your Linux box to handle all the routing and just let the hotspot do the internet side.
Right.
Let me ask you something. Are you absolutely married to doing this through Linux? Like, I'm the first guy that if I can do something using a Linux box, I'd be willing to do it. But there are far easier ways to do that than using a computer.
I just want it to work. In my future self, where I actually am a master of networking or whatever, I would like to have redundancy, but where I can plug in my cell phone. And that's why I thought the Linux might be a better idea. But I wanted to ask your opinion of the best way of using Sprint, and that's kind of the next rub, is I use Sprint.
Sure.
And, well, they don't appreciate other carriers.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Matt, what's your thought? How would you go about setting that up?
I'll be honest with you. I wouldn't go straight Linux. I mean, that's a lot of work. And if you want to do it, fantastic. I mean, more power to you. But that's a lot of work. I heard I just read somebody say vomit, but maybe use a Pi. I've looked into Raspberry Pis. pfSense will not run on a Pi. You'd be running a straight Linux, and you'd have to have a couple inputs for that. I don't know how well a Pi would handle a lot of clients. You know, maybe you're at that 10, 15, 20. I don't even know. But here's another question I got for you: is what are you running from Sprint? Is it wireless, or do you have a hard line?
It's a wireless. It's just 4G. It's a 4G hotspot, and I use my cell phone sometimes, and sometimes it's 4G hotspot. So
first off, can you even shut off the routing function on that? That's the first question. And two, how are you going to get wire? You're going to lose some bandwidth going from the hotspot to another router and then out to your devices if you're. You see what I'm saying?
My plan is to use the computers that pass through, and then to have it just point the internet from my existing bigger, more powerful router through to there, and eventually just upgrade that. The bandwidth is not necessarily. I'd rather have a little bit of reliability than like 4G speeds. I'm fine with 3G.
It is technically what you're suggesting is technically possible. You can do it with some firewall rules in your Linux box. In fact, if you go back and listen to our episode, The Truth About Southeast Linux Fix, they actually ran an entire conference off of a cell phone hotspot. I do want to make a stop in our interactive mumble room. Nunix has something to add to the conversation.
Yeah, I was thinking that this would be a perfect time to look into OpenSense. It's a security-enhanced fork of pfSense, and if you can run it in a VM if you want. I wouldn't recommend virtualizing any network equipment, but you can get some pretty inexpensive devices that'll run it from PC engines. And then you have multiple NICs, and that'll give you your foothold into going into network engineering if that's what you really feel like doing as well.
And Matt, Warhead SE, you had a thought about Shorewall?
Right. If you wanted to stick with something you're somewhat familiar with, the Linux side, you do have a couple of options that are available on the Linux side, such as Shorewall. So there is that. There is pfSense. There is OpenSense. He's got multiple choices.
I think my only concern is the wireless aspect. I mean, I don't know if you'd have to go with a WISP mode almost. You know, like there's some routers, when I go to a hotel, I go to WISP mode.
Sure.
I don't know if that...
I feel like if you brought the internet in through, and this is where I was going to suggest, is if you brought the internet directly into a router like a Microtech, like you plugged a USB cable in, so you're coming off of your 4G or LTE tower and bringing that in as a hardwire connection into your router, essentially using the phone as an LTE modem. Now the rest of the network becomes very transparent as to how you would treat any WAN connection.
Yeah.
Now, as Matt correctly pointed out, you'd have to have some way to get that phone to go into some sort of bridge mode, because otherwise you're going to double NAT yourself, and that wouldn't necessarily bother like browsing internet traffic, but it's going to break Skype calls. It's going to break any sort of online gaming, because it's going to break your UPnP functionality.
Port forwarding would be a nightmare.
It would become impossible.
Yeah.
Because you can't, well, not impossible, but
it
you would
be
have
a nightmare.
Yeah, you'd have to, essentially what you'd have to do is you'd have to assign, you need to have 9 max if it's only going to give you 9 internal IPs off of that WiMAX connection, or whatever the Sprint calls their LTE now.
Have you looked into, I'm sorry.
I have a program that actually lets me plug my phone in called Easy Tether. It works on Linux. It's kind of like PDA-Net for Linux, and it has a Windows client too, but whatever. And I actually have the USB ability to plug it into my Linux box already directly from my hotspot.
Okay.
So my phone can be easy tethered, and the hotspot is just a USB modem.
Well, I mean, so here, let's just get this out of the way. If you go into network connections on Linux, either on GNOME or on KDE, under whatever internet connection you want to share, under the IPv4 connection method, instead of choosing automatic to get a DHCP address, you can choose share to other computers. I mean, so if that's the answer you're looking for, if you're just looking for the simple and straightforward answer of how do I share an internet connection through my laptop, there is a way to do that. It's riddled with all sorts of issues, as we've discussed, but it's possible.
And the other question is, are you actually using a GUI, or are you doing this all CLI?
I'm more familiar with GUIs because I'm like I said, a Linux newbie, but I am more than willing to learn. I used to code, but now I'm literally teaching people how to ride a horse.
Okay.
But regardless, so I'm not a complete adverse to the command line. I'm just not used to the Linux commands themselves.
Sure.
And then you can find those anywhere on the internet. So, man, I'd like to see your setup. I don't know if you can send it to Noah when you do get it set up. I'd love to see how you did that.
Yeah, if you do, when you get it set up, either give us a call back or just shoot us an email at live@asknoahshow.com. We'd love to feature it.
No problem.
All right, man.
Good luck.
Thanks for the call. 855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Just a couple of minutes as we wrap up the program for this week. Matt, thanks so much for taking the time to be here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. I was telling Noah off the air, I said, man, this is the first time in radio I've actually talked like this and enjoyed it.
Because
and had